We did it! We finally completed the entire Mothership Zeta DLC for Fallout 3, and now we can reap its rich rewards. I covered all of the loot as we came upon it during my series of this DLC, but in case you missed an episode, or if you'd rather just get to the rewards, I'll cover everything new we get from Mothership Zeta here. We'll start with weapons. The first item we ever find is the shock baton. We get one while fleeing with Soma from our holding cell. We find it on the corpse of the alien that opens the door that lets us out, and aliens all over the ship carry these. It's probably the most common weapon we'll find. If you have a high enough repair skill, you should be able to make a fully repaired shock baton before you even leave the holding cells. The shock baton works a lot like the police baton from Earth, though they differ in that they do 2 electrical damage every second for 5 seconds. They have a base damage per attack of 20, but since they're pretty fast, they have a damage per second of 48.2, making it a pretty decent melee weapon, but not quite as nice as my sword from Operation Anchorage. There's a unique version of the shock baton called the Electro Suppressor. We find it in the engine room. In the room on the other side of the window, we see upon first entering the engine room. Inside the room, we find a table upon which is alien epoxy and biogel, and next to them, the Electro Suppressor. This weapon is very different from the regular shock batons. It doesn't do electrical damage. Instead, it has a knockdown effect upon a critical strike. And this knockdown effect works both in and outside of VATS. It also does more base damage than the regular shock baton, dealing 24 damage, bringing its DPS up to 57.7. So essentially the knockdown effect gives us enough time to get in a few more strikes with the thing, which compensates for its lack of electrical damage over time. Next, we'll talk about the new energy rifle offering from Mothership Zeta, the Alien Disintegrator. These are also extremely common. We find them lying on shelves and on the corpses of aliens. The Alien Disintegrator is an amazing weapon. It has a huge magazine capacity, holding 100 rounds before we have to reload. Reloading is a snap. We just push a button on the rifle, and it has pretty low spread, with a spread of 1, while also packing a wallop, dealing 65 base damage and 2 attacks per second, bringing the DPS up to 130. It's moderately expensive to use in VATS with an action point cost of 30, bringing the damage per action point to 2.2. It has a critical chance multiplier of ×2 and deals 50 critical damage. Overall, it's an excellent energy weapon. The spread makes it difficult for long-range sniping, but it's wonderful for medium and short distance. We find a unique version of the Alien Disintegrator inside the weapons lab. To find it, we head to the first firing range, the one with the long hallway where we teleport Brahmin in, and then look to the right. Lying on a shelf is the Destabilizer. The Destabilizer is a unique version of the Alien Disintegrator, but the biggest change is that this is a fully automatic rifle. Because it's fully automatic, its base damage is a bit weaker. It deals only 30 damage compared to the Disintegrator's 65. But because it's automatic, it does 4.5 shots per second compared to the Disintegrator's 2. It also has a much weaker critical chance multiplier because it's automatic, with a critical chance multiplier of only 0.44 compared to the Disintegrator's 2. And it does less critical damage, 20 compared to 50, and it has higher spread, 1.5 spread compared to the Disintegrator's 1. But it does cost fewer action points, costing only 25 compared to the Disintegrator's 30. That said, everything considered, it deals only 1.2 damage per action point compared to the Disintegrator's 2.2, but outside of VATS, it has a damage per second of 135 compared to the Disintegrator's 130. It also has a strange quirk. When used in VATS, even though it's an automatic rifle, it only fires 1 round, which makes no sense as an automatic weapon. So this is really only useful outside of VATS. Next up is the Alien Atomizer, which is a new energy pistol. Like all alien weapons we find on the ship, it uses power modules, but the unique thing about it is that it has 0 spread, meaning that a player with 100 energy weapon skill can fire right on the crosshair. It's also extremely valuable. Weighing only 2 pounds, each one fully repaired is worth 250 caps. It has a base damage of 35, but costs 20 action points, making it, in my opinion, better to use outside of VATS. It has a final DPS of 105, which makes it a pretty deadly pistol. We find a unique version of the Atomizer in the game called the Atomic Pulverizer. We find it upon first entering the weapons lab. Crossing a large room, we go through a doorway and then activate a wall-mounted terminal to open the nearby closed door. In this room, we find the Atomic Pulverizer lying on a bottom shelf to the right beneath a Giddy-Up Buttercup, right next to an Alien Atomizer. It's extremely easy to miss this weapon because it looks exactly like an Alien Atomizer and it's sitting right next to one. It deals 37 damage, which is only a few points higher than the Atomizer. However, its action point cost is only 12 compared to the Alien Atomizer's 20. This gives the weapon the distinction of having the second lowest action point cost, tied with the Ritual Knife from Point Lookout. The only weapon with a lower AP cost is the Toy Knife, also from Point Lookout, meaning that you can get almost twice as many attacks in with a single bar of AP compared to using the Alien Atomizer. It also has a critical chance multiplier of ×2 compared to the Atomizer's ×1. All of this combined brings the DPS up to 111 compared to the Atomizer's 105, and the damage per action point up to 3.1 compared to the Atomizer's 1.8. Aside from that, it shares many of the other distinctive features of the Atomizer, including its zero spread, which means that this weapon, like the Atomizer, has dead-on accuracy. Next up is Paulson's Revolver, which we can only get on Paulson's corpse, either by killing him ourselves or allowing him to die during our adventure. Paulson's Revolver is a unique .44 Magnum. The unique and weird thing about Paulson's Revolver is it shoots multiple projectiles at once. It shoots 9 pellets with each round. Because of this, it has a chance to score a critical hit on enemies outside of VATS 9 different times, making this a potentially devastating weapon for characters with a high critical chance and a high small gun skill. It's also unique in that it's one of the few .44 Magnums in Fallout 3 without a scope. Paulson's Revolver has a base damage of 45, 5 times each projectile, 9 projectiles, 45. So in order to get this base damage, each projectile would have to hit. And its DPS is 101.3. This makes it significantly better than the scoped .44 Magnum in the base game, but not quite as good in terms of raw damage and DPS as Blackhawk, the reward we got from doing the quest Agatha's Song, which I covered in a video that you can watch here. Also, since it fires multiple projectiles, it has a much higher spread than any other .44 Magnum, with a spread of 3 compared to a spread of 0.3 with every other Magnum. That said, it is deadly in close range, effectively being a one-handed pistol shotgun. This weapon can't be reverse pickpocketed from him. He actually uses a different non-playable version while alive. This gun only spawns in his inventory when he dies. Next is the new big gun we get from Mothership Zeta, the Drone Kanon. We find these on the wreckages of the Guardian drones we find all over the ship, making it pretty easy to obtain. The Drone Kanon shoots a giant ball of energy that basically acts like a grenade, but it's unique in that it bounces first before exploding. We can use the Drone Kanon to bounce off walls and reach hard to access areas. After firing, the electrical ball detonates after about 3 seconds or so. Even though this is a big guns weapon making use of the big guns perk, each bolt acts a whole lot like an explosive. The base damage of the bolt is 40, but then it does 100 explosive damage, which is highest towards the center of the detonation and diminishes moving away from the center of the detonation. It can do 3.3 attacks per second, bringing its DPS up to 466.7. or 616.7 if we've maxed out our big gun skill. But its real damage is a little bit smaller. If we empty a full clip, assume that each shot hits the target, and if we factor in the time it takes to reload, the DPS drops to about 85.7, or 113.3 with maxed out big guns. Still, it's a pretty devastating weapon. We find a unique version of this weapon called the Drone Canon Xb. We find this in the weapons lab, in an experimentation room just before we find the rifle ranges. It's in a room near to the large room where we find a bunch of Earth goods, including some Tesla power armor. To get the Drone Canon Xb, we need to destroy the experimental weapons drone that was shooting at Brahmin in this room. We find the XB on their wreckage. The difference between the Drone Canon Xb and the regular Drone Cannon is in the way the electric projectile works. The Drone Cannon lobs these big, explosive electric energy balls that bounce once and then detonate after a few seconds. The Drone Canon Xb works very differently. Instead, the balls of energy detonate upon impact. They don't bounce. Otherwise, the stats of this are almost identical to a drone cannon. Each do 40 damage, have a DPS of 466.7, and do 100 explosive damage. They have a ×1 critical chance multiplier, do 50 critical damage, and cost 30 action points, dealing 4.7 damage per action point. Not very effective and pretty expensive in VATS, but a wonderful gun to use outside of VATS. Next up is what is probably my favorite weapon from this DLC, the MPLX Nova Surge. We find this in the cargo hold. To find it, we have to hack into a terminal that we find sitting on a desk and remotely unlock a floor safe. We find the floor safe embedded in the trash just next to the garbage chute, where we find Brahmin and Yaoguai being dumped into space. The safe is labeled Underwood Safe, and inside we find a note describing the lore about the weapon, some energy cells, and the gun itself, the MPLX Nova Surge. We see that it's a beautiful prototype plasma pistol. But this weapon is way more powerful than a standard plasma pistol. It has a base damage of 80 compared to a plasma pistol's base damage of 25. It also has a higher critical chance multiplier of ×3 instead of a plasma pistol's ×2, and does 75 critical damage, which is 3 times that of a plasma pistol. This brings the DPS of the weapon up to 240 compared to 75 of a plasma pistol, and a final damage per action point of 3.8 compared to a plasma pistol's 1.2. It has the same magazine capacity as a plasma pistol, however the drawback is that each shot from the MPLX Nova Surge consumes 2 energy cells, meaning that effectively we can only get 8 shots off per magazine before we have to reload. It also has less than half the durability of a regular plasma pistol, which makes sense because this is a prototype, and the pistol has a weight problem. As the note said, it's twice as heavy as a regular plasma pistol, weighing 6 pounds instead of 3. Next up is the Samurai Sword. We find it while exploring the maintenance level. It's our reward for clearing it, which we find at the very end on a shelf next to a bunch of first aid kits. Toshiro's Samurai Sword is a completely unique weapon, the only one of its kind in the entire game. It does higher damage than most other swords, dealing 24 raw damage compared to 10 from the Chinese officer's sword. This makes it the second best sword in the game, beat only by Jingwei's Shock Sword from Operation Anchorage, which deals 35 raw damage. The Shock Sword also has an electrical damage over time, which really makes it a superior weapon, having 82.8 DPS compared to the Samurai Sword's 55.4. But where the Samurai Sword shines is in its critical damage. This sucker deals a whopping 40 critical damage compared to the Shock Sword's 25. It also costs far fewer action points in VATS, 19 compared to the Shock Sword's 28, which means its damage per action point is 2.5, very close to the Shock Sword's 2.9. And it has nearly double the durability of the Shock Sword, 833 compared to 486. So the Samurai Sword is indeed a viable weapon for a melee build. Next up are the Cryo Grenades and Cryo Mines. We get these from Elliot Tokorian after clearing the Cryo Lab with his help. Inside the Cryo Lab, he found a bunch of alien cryogenic technology, which he uses to craft the Cryo Grenades and Cryo Mines. These items were in the game files of the base vanilla game, but they weren't actually added to the world until Mothership Zeta, so they are effectively new weapons we get with this DLC. Both the Cryo Mine and the Cryo Grenade do hardly any damage at all, they do 1 point of damage, but they do freeze enemies for 3 seconds. We only have a brief window of opportunity to get as many of these as possible. Elliot only makes them after clearing the cryo lab, and only a handful every 3 hours. Then, once we leave the engineering core and begin our spacewalk, he stops making them forever, which means we could get a theoretically unlimited supply as long as we never complete the DLC and stay in the engineering core. But realistically, we're only going to get a handful of these. Next is the Alien Captain Sidearm, which we only get after killing the alien captain whom we find on the bridge of Mothership Zeta. On his corpse, we find alien power modules and cells, and the unique weapon, Alien Captain Sidearm. The Alien Captain Sidearm uses alien power modules, not power cells, unlike other alien blasters. Also unlike alien blasters, it shoots out energy like a shotgun. Every time we pull the trigger, it shoots 6 beams at the cost of 3 rounds. So it does burn through alien power modules. Like the Metal Blaster from the Pit DLC and like Paulson's Revolver, each of the 6 energy beams has the chance to land a critical strike on the enemy, which means characters with high luck and high critical chance are likely to land multiple crits with each attack. But this chance only works outside of VATS. Inside of VATS, you can only land 1 critical strike. It does the exact same amount of damage as the Alien Atomizer, 35, split between 6 beams, but it has way more spread than the Alien Atomizer, with a spread of whopping 3.0 compared to the Alien Atomizer's 0. This is, of course, because it's practically a shotgun. And lastly, there's the Alien Blaster. When we finally beat the DLC and make it back to Earth, we see that the aliens retrieved the alien ship wreckage, but left the corpse of its pilot. We find him lying next to the alien beacon, and on the ground next to him we find a whole bunch of alien power cells and a unique weapon, the Alien Blaster. The Alien Blaster was available in the base game of Fallout 3, but after installing Mothership Zeta, we don't get it until after this DLC, so I'm going to cover it as part of the DLC. The Alien Blaster is one of the most powerful weapons in the game because each shot is a guaranteed critical hit. The critical percent multiplier for this weapon is 100, making it impossible to not land a critical hit. It does electrical damage, like Jingwei's Shock Sword and the Captain's Sidearm, and has a base damage of 100, which is huge, much larger than any other weapon we find in this DLC. It has an action point cost of 20, bringing the damage per action point up to 5, deals 100 critical damage, bringing its DPS up to 300. The drawback to this weapon is that it uses alien power cells, a much more rare ammunition. This is why I made such a big deal about finding all of the alien power cells on Mothership Zeta. We can walk away with thousands upon thousands of alien power modules, the ammunition used for all other weapons on the mothership, but there is a maximum of 1,152 alien power cells in the entire game, including all expansions. 362 in the base game, 365 on Mothership Zeta, and 425 with broken steel installed. So this weapon is best used for special occasions. Next, we'll talk about armor. Mothership Zeta is a weapons-heavy DLC, but we do find a few cool pieces of armor. The first is the spacesuit that belonged to Colonel Hartigan. He sadly died when we released him from his cryopod. On his body, we find the spacesuit. The spacesuit is a gorgeous little suit, but it's not very practical outside space exploration. The entire suit only has a DR of 1, and despite supposedly protecting us from interstellar radiation, it has no radiation bonus. It is unique, however, in that it has 10 million HP, making it extremely unlikely that we'll ever have to repair it. However, if for some reason we do need to repair it, it can be repaired with a radiation suit or an advanced radiation suit. Since it's a quest item, it's weightless when we find it. However, after the quest, we can keep it, and at that point, it weighs 5 pounds. Next is Paulson's outfit, which we get by killing Paulson and looting it from his corpse, or by reverse pickpocketing it from him. Paulson's outfit is an attractive cowboy getup with a DR of 5, and it grants +1 to charisma, +10 to small guns, and +5 to speech. He also has a sheriff's hat, which grants +1 DR and +1 to perception. Then there's Toshiro Kago's samurai armor. This suit of armor has a stunning DR of 30 and grants us plus 10 to melee damage and 10 to melee weapons. It weighs 20 pounds. The matching samurai helmet has a DR of 5 and weighs 3 pounds. This suit of armor is one of the best suits in the game for a melee-focused build. You could try to get it without killing him by reverse pickpocketing a higher DR suit of armor onto Toshiro, but it's really difficult and we're still stealing. Next is Elliot's winterized medic armor. This is a similar suit to the winterized combat armor that we recall from Operation Anchorage, but it is unique. It's clean, telling us that Elliot was abducted before he saw too much combat, and there's a medic symbol on the back. The stats are a little different too. It has the same DR as a winterized combat armor suit with a DR of 32, though it's slightly less durable, but it grants plus 10 to medicine. The matching winterized medic helmet has a DR of 5. We can get the winterized combat armor without killing Elliot or pickpocketing it from him if we bring him with us into the Cryo lab. If we do, we can find 2 other suits. Next up is General Chase's overcoat, which we find in a locker labeled Military Footlocker while exploring the maintenance level. It's in that same room with the vaulted ceiling where we got attacked by aliens who shot at us from the roof of the nearby pod. We remember General Chase. He played a prominent role in the Operation Anchorage simulation. He wore a stunning jacket in that DLC. I remember admiring it, and it looks like we now have our own copy. It has a DR of 20, which is pretty decent for a clothing item, and grants plus 1 to charisma, plus 10 to small guns, and plus 5 to speech. It's quite an attractive coat. It looks a lot like Colonel Autumn's uniform, only it's got a winterized Operation Anchorage coloring. That's it for armor. We'll move on to consumables and miscellaneous items. Let's talk about food. First up is the new alien worm food. This disgusting-looking entree is one of 3 new food items we find here. Since it does not come from Earth, it doesn't give us rads, but it only heals 5 hit points. That said, since it has no adverse effects, we might as well chow down on these suckers when we find them. Then there's the complimentary alien squid food, which is exactly like the tentacle food, healing plus 5 hit points with no negative status effect. But the exciting new aid item is Alien Biogel, which we find on the corpses of aliens and scattered all over the ship on shelves and tables. The Biogel heals between 10 and 30 hit points based on our medicine skill level, but the downside is that consuming the Biogel gives us a negative status effect called a biochemical anomaly. These anomalies are random. In this instance, I got -1 intelligence, but it could be -1 perception, endurance, agility, or plus 5 radiation damage per second. Or it could be a good status effect, healing radiation or hit points, or giving us a temporary stat boost of plus 2 to strength or 2 to agility. It's good to collect as many of these as possible because later on we get to turn these into adapted biogel. After we release Elliot Tokorian from his cryopod, we discover that he has the ability to transform alien biogel into adapted biogel. We can simply have him convert them in stacks of 10 by talking to him. Adapted biogel looks just like alien biogel, but instead of restoring only 10 hit points, adapted biogel restores 80 hit points, and the amount it restores increases based on your medicine skill. With 100 in medicine, an adapted biogel will heal 150 hit points. However, like the alien biogel, the adapted biogel also has a 50% chance to inflict the Lone Wanderer with some random status effect. It draws from the same list of status effects as the alien biogel. Even when the potential for a negative side effect is considered, the adapted biogel is by far one of the best healing items in the game, healing even more than a Stimpack. At 100 medicine skill, the most a Stimpack could ever heal is 90. The next items we find all over the ship, sometimes on alien corpses, but most often on shelves and tables scattered around the ship. These are the alien crystals, which have no use except that they're valuable. There are 2 types of crystals. The large ones sell for 20 caps, and the small ones sell for 10. Since they're weightless, we can collect as many as we can. And the last new item we find is Alien Epoxy. This Alien Epoxy is used to repair the currently equipped weapon, which is extremely important when using Earth weapons during this DLC, as we can't find others to repair our gear with. Each Alien Epoxy will restore the condition of your currently equipped weapon on a scale matching your repair skill. So someone with a repair skill of 100 can restore 30% condition to their weapon using one Alien Epoxy. To use the epoxy, just navigate to the aid section of your Pip-Boy and activate it, like a stim pack. It'll restore the condition of your currently equipped weapon. And there you go. That's an overview of every single new item we get from Mothership Zeta. We can now head back to the Capital Wasteland confident that we've explored every corner, uncovered every secret, and walked away with every treasure. And with that, our series on Mothership Zeta comes to an end. But never fear, we have not come to the end of Fallout 3 lore. I publish many new videos every single week about all the games in the Fallout franchise. So if you want to make sure you don't miss my next episode, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. I've got a brand new shirt in the shop. Cows! We've got cows! Celebrate the alien abduction of two-headed Brahmin with this fine t-shirt. These shirts come in a wide array of colors and in a variety of both men's and women's sizes. You can also find this design on a bunch of other goods, mugs, posters, prints, pillows, etc. So if interested, you can find a link to my shop in the description below, or you can click here. If you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming a sponsor here on YouTube or a patron on Patreon. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned because I'm going to have a lot more Fallout content for you later this week.